Okay, so this video started, it went through a lot of iterations in my head. First I was gonna do the VR response, the I want to say Katey Flowers, but I'm really not 100% sure, because I never committed to actually doing it. But it was the hashtag only 10 decks. Um, I mean, I kind of did it in my head, but I never recorded it. I never planned on really recording it. So before I even formulated that in my to-do list, um, Lent came, and I saw I saw a Mixtress Rae video where she was doing only 10 for Lent, which she got from one of her friends, and I can't remember who it was. But I can link her video below if you guys are interested. And I thought, well, that's a great idea because while I don't practice Catholicism, I went to Catholic school for a very long time. And so Lent kind of became a habit for me. Because when you're a kid, it's like a competition. And I liked that as I got older, like a competition with myself to practice self-discipline. It obviously didn't always work out for me, especially as I got older. But fun story, that's actually how I stopped drinking soda. I gave up soda for Lent one year when I was in elementary school still, and I never really drank it again. I mean, now I don't drink it unless it's mixed with rum. And one year in college, I gave up dairy, and by dairy, I was really trying to focus on giving up like ice cream. And when Lent was over and I tried having dairy again, I became a little lactose intolerant. And eventually I got back over that, but I, yeah, those were the two most successful Lents I ever had. So anyway, I saw the idea to do only 10 for Lent. And then I changed it to only 5 for Lent because, oh, first of all, I was traveling. I was away for when Lent started, so I am now several weeks behind. But, I'm not behind in the challenge for myself. I'm just behind in posting the video. Yeah, I changed it to only 5 decks because 10 decks is like almost a third of the decks I even own. It's a little less than a third. And I thought that's not really necessary for me. A lot of my decks I'm still deep diving into, so I spend a lot of time with one deck, and in a 40-day period, I don't need 10 decks. I just don't. So I cut it down to 5. And I feel good about them. I'm gonna hold myself to these 5 decks because they're very versatile, and they go together. Like their energies feel the same to me, but at the same time the artwork. Yeah, the artwork in some of them is pretty different. So if I feel like switching it up, I can still just grab another one. But it's gonna be 4. Sorry, I keep looking over there because that's where I put them. It's 4 tarot decks and 1 oracle deck, and my biggest challenge is gonna be the 1 oracle deck. But it's probably, I mean, this oracle deck is like, it's probably one of the best decks that I own, oracle or tarot or otherwise. Like this deck is incredible. So I'm pretty sure it will capture me for 40 days straight. So let's get right to it. This is well, I don't keep my cards in boxes, so I'll just show you the guidebook for this. It's the Angelarium Oracle of Emanations by Peter Moorbacher, I'm gonna say is how you say it. And Eli Minaya. Sorry. And this deck is, again, like my Black Tarot, more than I expected or could ever hope for. It's not if you're one of those people who really likes those angel oracles, this is not for you. If you're one of those people who doesn't like the angel oracles, but you like the idea of working with angel energy, probably for you, because this kind of solves the problems I have with angel oracles, in that I'm tired of all decks that do this, but I'm tired of seeing little white baby angels or grown white angels. It's great for those of you who can identify with that. I can't. And in my own spiritual practice and beliefs, I highly doubt that that's what angels look like. Well, that could be a whole discussion on what angels even are. But anyway, so this, as you can see off the bat, this hits different. The structure of this deck is such that it follows the tree of life. So you have, pull up I have notes in here, just ignore that. It looks like a chunky book, but it's in many different languages. It is, it's Lo Scarabeo, so again, you know how it is with their books. Half of it, like 4/5 of it is not relevant if you don't speak any of those languages. So it's heavily influenced by Kabbalah. Has 11 emanations of the Tree of Life, which is the first portion of the deck. And then it has, oops, there we go. And then it has angels that chosen to represent the entity that would sort of stand on each of those pathways. And so they were chosen from largely Judaism, Christianity, and there's even Israfel, I believe. Israfel is essentially Raphael, which I'm sure if you are more familiar with Christianity, you recognize Raphael. But Israfel is the Islamic name for Raphael. So it's very, I mean, it is all based on monotheistic religion, obviously, but there's multiple cultures represented and multiple schools of thought. I mean, there are many people who practice Judaism that first of all, the Book of Enoch is not canonical. I think that's how you say that one too. So some people, specifically people who sort of follow the more mystic path, some people take it and consider it in their own spirituality, and there are some schools of thought that disregard it altogether. But in that way, it incorporates different schools of thought, different practices, and different angels. Some of them, like I said, some are mentioned in the Bible, but it's a different sort of version, which we'll see when we go through the flip through. I think I paused on some pages for you guys. You could pause if you're interested. So here we have, I believe it's the first card. I'm pretty sure I put these in the correct order. So these are this first portion is the emanation. So you have 11 of these. Oops, sorry. And the artwork is just, I mean, captivating. I think. It's hard nowadays to come by decks that aren't just completely like collaged together and I don't know. And now you're getting into the angels. So Gabriel, obviously one of the more well-known angels. There was only maybe 2 or 3 that I couldn't reference in a religious text. This was one of them, and I'm not sure. I think the other one might be towards the end of the deck. But if you're familiar with them in religious texts, not just in this beautiful world that this artist has created, comment down below, because I'm fascinated and I want to know everything about this lore. I love this one. I did read one minor complaint that somebody had was that Metatron was not in this deck. Which is interesting because the Book of Enoch is referenced very well. It's not directly referenced, but a lot of these angels are in the Book of Enoch. And Enoch, obviously, well, not obviously, but is the man that ascends, or maybe even transcends, and becomes Metatron. So I guess I could see wanting him in this deck. I don't know. I have so much to work with, because there's so many I wasn't familiar with already that I'm not really missing the one that's referenced like all the time in mysticism. But you know, that's a nice little reference, I suppose. So this one also was really, I loved doing the research into all of these angels, because I learned probably more than any other deck has ever taught me. But I loved how it's, I don't want to say a clue, because it's pretty obvious that it's Raphael, but Angel of Song, and you have the trumpet. But if you know your, I don't want to say mythology, but you know, if you know your religious text, Raphael, or Israfel, is the angel that when it blows the trumpet is when it's basically the coming of end times. So where you may recognize this is in the Judgment card in Tarot. You have an angel blowing a trumpet. That's Raphael. Although, of course, in the Rider-Waite-Smith, if I'm not mistaken, it's a little white baby angel. Love this one. I couldn't reference this one either. Some of it was hard because there's various spellings, like a million different spellings for every name, because so much of it is obviously translated. But I couldn't find one that really sort of made sense that it would be this one. But he reminds me so much of, well, maybe not so much, but he reminds me of from Mortal Kombat. Oh man, that's gonna drive me crazy. Of course I can't think of it now. Raiden? I want to say Raiden. I'm gonna go with Raiden. Someone will correct me at some point. And the images are just beautiful. This one I love. So, in the Book of Enoch, there's 20 watchers of 200 angels. 20 of them are watchers and their purpose was to sort of watch mankind on Earth. But they sort of took it upon themselves, I guess you could say, to procreate with human women. And they created a race of giants who killed many people and then turned on themselves as a result of God and I believe Michael's intervention. So they turned on themselves. But aside from creating that race of giants, these 20 watchers taught mankind and presumably I've seen it told differently in different sources, but also sometimes they also say that they taught, you know, the women that they slept with, the secrets of heaven. So they taught them, you know what? I wrote it down. They taught them enchantments, root cuttings, resolving of enchantments, astrology, astronomy, signs of the sun, course of the moon, basically meaning the lunar calendar, geomancy, which is like divination using basically earth. An example that I found, because I haven't ever heard it referenced as geomancy before, because I'm ignorant in many things, but was when you like throw rocks or stones to foretell the future or gain insight. And the clouds, that's how it was referenced as the clouds. However, it was explained as elsewhere meteorology. And this was the angel who taught them meteorology, angel of sky. So I mean, if you like this art, which if you're into, I would say if you're a gamer, oops, I'm just trying to, there we go. If you're a gamer or you like graphic novels or anything of the sort, you'll probably really love this deck, because it is based on like a whole world created by this artist for that sort of genre. And he created these characters who are obviously based on like actual angels referenced in historical texts, historical religious texts, and it very much feels like, if you know what I mean, it feels like the lore of like a really good game that you're about to get into. And when I'm gaming with, like, my boyfriend and I will play games, and I'm that gamer who has to collect all of the pieces of lore. And I'll spend hours reading about the lore online. I mean, I'm like a really big nerd about it. But I was a reader before I was a gamer, so that kind of explains it. And I always loved, this was another one I couldn't reference elsewhere. That would explain why I really get into the background, because I love sort of fantasy and science fiction. So this was the Angelarium, Oracle of Emanations, and I'm gonna go through the other decks that I'm using for Lent. I probably won't, I'm not gonna flip through every single card because it's not necessary, but this one just deserved it. Like, the artwork and the energy isn't what you'd usually see in the tarot community, so I imagine it doesn't get very much attention, or the attention that it deserves for that reason. But I know somebody out there will love it. So that was that Oracle deck. This is the Black Tarot. I just got this deck. It's still in order. There's a flip through on my channel because it's gorgeous, and again, don't see it very often, so it also deserved a lot of attention. And funny, I went to this one because this was one of my favorite cards when I did the flip through. The artwork complements the Angelarium and the other three decks. I had mentioned before, I'm really into my decks like flowing together. Like I like when, I like when they're like an extension of each other, but they're also very much their own thing. And I sort of do because I'm still doing deep dives into many of my decks, I sort of do still plan out which ones I'm going to use ahead of time so I can commit that time to them and not just use like a deck for a week and then not see it again for several months. So I do keep in mind the energy and the artwork of a deck, as I'm sure many people do when they're doing their pairings. So I'll just actually do this so you guys can see here. Is this in frame? Yeah. So this is the black tarot, and this is how the Angelarium looks with it. I love the black and white contrast because the Angelarium is a very bright deck. Very colorful. Not bright, it's very colorful. I just realized I forgot to put this back at the bottom. They complement each other really well. And then the next deck that I am using is the fairly new. It's the Surrealist Tarot. I believe also by Lo Scarabeo. Well, it was published by Lo Scarabeo. And I did a initial like sort of like light study. Like I went through the deck and I absorbed everything. But I'm gonna do a deep dive with that deck. Every time I group my decks together to work with them. Oh, I see what I did. It's usually about 5 or 6 decks over like a 2-month period, maybe 6 to 8 weeks. And one of them is like the one I'm doing like, oh my lord, cat, as usual. One of them is the one I would deep dive into. So I am going to the Tarot Kaizen. I think that's how you say that as well. And I'll probably do that with this deck because there's just so much. There we go. So this deck, if you like Surrealist artwork, well, you need to want this deck because it doesn't hold back the surrealism, but it's just so much to see. If you like working intuitively and you like cards that offer something different every time you pull them, this is the deck for that. They're busy. They kind of have to be in order to offer all of this. But they are lovely for that purpose. Unfortunately, like most decks that are based on collections of artwork or an artist's body of work, you know, they fail on the diversity. At least the realistic diversity. But the way that it doesn't bother me, because usually that fucking pisses me off. There's like, I just can't stand that. But the way that this doesn't bother me is because, again, a lot of the figures are not even human. So the few figures that are, oh yeah, that's definitely a human. I mean, at that point in this deck, they're the minority. So, I mean, it is what it is. See, like, these guys are made out of stone. You know what I mean? And Frida Kahlo is in it. So, and it's nice that she represents one of the humans in the deck. I love this Chariot. And the Chariot is one of those cards that will make or break my decision to get a deck. So this, basically, I didn't have a choice. Is essentially what I'm saying. So again, it looks lovely. Oops. With my Oracle deck. Well, maybe not these specifically. These aren't the most colorful of the cards in the deck. But I don't know, they just feel good together. Now, since I'm using this deck as my deep dive, I don't know how often I'll be doing spreads with it because it's more of my like serious study deck, but it still has to go because that's how my mind works. All right, so 2 more decks. As promised, only doing 5. Sorry, I was just shaking the shit out of the camera. But hopefully you don't get motion sickness. I sometimes do, so I feel your pain. I apologize. The next deck was in my top 5 for beginners video. And it's the Urban Tarot. I have used this already. It's not like one of my newer decks. But another thing I keep in mind when I'm choosing my decks is if I have a lot that are a little heavier or I'm less familiar with them, I need a couple that are just working decks. So this one reads like a fucking dream. It's just I don't know. It's like if you had a friend from New York, this is how they would talk to you. And I love this deck. I do. It feels great. It's a little big, but it feels good. And I need a deck to feel good. It reads, it's very straightforward. I love my straightforward decks. The court cards are, man, these court cards are so good. Like if you like to really study your court cards, then you should really get this deck. If you're into court cards, you know, like you do the character building with them, I don't know why you wouldn't get this deck. It's brilliant. I haven't seen any deck do court cards this well. So this is gonna be one of my, well, is, because I've already started using it. One of my working decks. And it's very, so the artwork in this is very different from what we've seen already, but, oops. Oh, I like that. I always see something I didn't see before. Like I was saying, the artwork is different from what we've seen before, but again, the palette is similar. Again, sorry about the camera. And they just kind of look good together. I don't know. I really can't explain it. It just is an intuitive feeling I have when they just fit into this little family here. It could be that it's a more masculine feeling deck. And I that's kind of what I have going on this season. And my last deck and last working deck is the Spellcaster's Tarot. I don't know why I love this deck. If I were doing it all over again, I would probably not buy this deck because I'm not attracted really to the world that it's set in, or and the art. I mean, the artwork is it's beautiful, but it's very I don't know, not cartoony, but I don't know. I wouldn't go back and buy this. I wouldn't buy this deck today, but it was my first deck, and it's my favorite deck. There's a slight hesitation on that because I have a lot of favorite decks for different reasons, but this is like my deck. So I don't know. It's like I will forgive all of its flaws, though it has none. They're just personal preference flaws in style. I don't even see them because it's just like it just speaks to me. Like I would never buy the Everyday Witch Tarot, and that's very similar in style as well. And this sort of like fantasy world that this deck takes place in, where people like wear robes like to leave the house, is not something I'm usually drawn to, but I don't even see that in this deck. I mean, it is in the deck, I see it, but I can see past that. And it does all of the cards that I am picky about, it does them so well. Like if I could find, love this strength card. I don't know if I'm going to come across it, but if I could find the Three of Swords, like the Three of Swords, is another one of those cards that sometimes is depicted very vaguely, and I don't like that. I don't like vague cards. I like cards that can be interpreted different ways, but the layers of meaning are in the card, and it's very difficult to do. But when it's done, here it is. It's just so worth the effort. Like, it has, I don't know, there's a cat here and there. The work that you're doing and the return that you're getting. I like when the Three of Wands shows that. I like the ships that are there. This is more of a slightly more vague, although less guilty than the majority of other decks, Three of Wands. But like the ships where you can't tell if they're coming or going. Maybe they're doing both. Maybe one's coming, one's going. I like that. Because for me, it's about seeing results of your efforts. And this deck does that with the Three of Wands. It's very clear about the Seven of Swords. It's very clear about the Five of Swords. And the Five of Wands. I don't like when the Five of Swords and the Five of Wands are depicted too closely. It's just great. I just love this deck. Go-to deck for a very long time now. So that and the Urban Tarot are kind of going to be my my working decks while I really study the Black Tarot and the Surrealist Tarot. And all kind of grounded by my amazing Oracle deck.
just gonna put this here because I still think everyone should go buy this deck. So these are the decks I'm working with for Lent. And I'm very confident that this will be all I need, really. I mean, they just all offer so much. I am 100% sure I'm not going to be missing any of my other decks right now because these bring something of everything to the table. So if you're going to do the challenge where you only work with certain decks for a certain period of time, Lent or otherwise, keep that in mind. You don't want to bore yourself halfway through because you picked like the Moonchild Tarot and the Starchild Tarot and the Starseed Oracle. Like, that's great. You basically are working with the same deck. So just like switch things up for yourself while keeping everything a little cohesive so you don't feel too scattered. And you can really appreciate the energy of the time you're spending with those decks. That's how I do it anyway. So hopefully this was helpful to somebody. Maybe you saw some decks that you should go buy for yourself. And I'll see you next time. I'll let you know how